The New York Times recently published a piece looking into some new details in terms of the timeline and communications surrounding the hold of military aid to Ukraine. And what's interesting about this new article is that it gets into the involvement of some figures in the Trump administration who have avoided testifying, have avoided talking much about this. In some cases have implied that they knew nothing about what was going on, and we're now finding out that's not necessarily the case. So we're gonna talk about a few here. The first is Mick Mulvaney. At one point, about a week after Trump had initially decided or communicated that he wanted the aid to be held, he had sent an email saying, "I'm just trying to tie up some loose ends. Did we ever find out about the money for Ukraine and whether we can hold it back?" So he has been involved since June in that effort. Just bear that in mind, as the president says that in the House they never had people with firsthand information, but also stopped Mick Mulvaney from testifying. And Mick Mulvaney, the guy who sort of publicly outed Trump about this scandal when he admitted that it was a quid pro quo on national TV, he doesn't want to come and testify before the Senate either. And it looks like there's quite a bit that he could probably reveal. Now, the reply to that email from Mick Mulvaney was from an aide, Robert Blair, who replied that it would be possible but not pretty, quote, "expect Congress to become unhinged if the White House tried to countermand spending passed by the House and Senate." And he wrote, "It might further fuel the narrative that Mr. Trump was pro-Russia." So from the very beginning, when they were trying to set up this scheme, some inside of the administration were saying that, look, I'm with you, but this is gonna be really bad. And they did start to develop a legal argument from their point of view that because Trump is the commander in chief, he can effectively override anything Congress wants to do, which is a bold position. Probably they'll apply it to some other stuff eventually. And we have more on other people, but this is Mick Mulvaney initially, implying before that he didn't have much involvement in this, and apparently he was involved from the first week.
Yeah, and then he had a second round of excuses, which is, I was involved in holding up the aid, but I didn't know that it was because Trump wanted the investigations. Later you find out in the details, he absolutely knew, and he was the one enforcing it. So, but there is the fact that Mulvaney's trying to distance himself away from the Biden investigations is an interesting escape hatch, because then he can go to investigators and go, listen, I didn't know, but now I know. Okay, here's evidence. Okay, Mulvaney flipping is everything if he flips, but that's a giant, giant if. He's shown some indication that he does want to flip and that he has insurance, like Giuliani talked about, and as to why Trump should not throw him under the bus. He has said that publicly. I'm paraphrasing the word insurance, but basically said, I got too much information for anyone to throw me under a bus. So he knows, there's no question. He not only knew what they did, he knew it was wrong, and he knows that he can turn on Trump with that evidence. And so there's guilt all over this. There's 1,000 angles that I want to discuss here, but there's just one more on what John already mentioned. The law that they're violating in this particular case is the Impoundment Control Act. So when Congress puts aside money to be spent on a country, as they did with Ukraine, you cannot stop that money. And if you do, it violates the Impoundment Control Act. And so the internal White House lawyers, Justice Department lawyers, Office of Management and Budget lawyers all got together and they're like, okay, how do we break this law while having an excuse that we're not breaking the law? So the best thing they had was, well, we could say it's in the president's constitutional powers to break that law. Yet there's no such thing, okay? That's why they took a long time trying to come up with a thing that doesn't exist.
So you can understand why they would think Trump would like that when he's previously said there's a thing, Article 2, that lets me do whatever I want to do.
Yeah, that's not remotely true. That is not in our constitutional system. There is no clause in the Constitution that says, yes, it's true, Congress writes the laws, but the president can ignore them at his leisure. It doesn't exist. The president must follow the laws, period.
Ideally, I guess. Yes, okay, so in terms of there's a lot of guilt to go around, and also, like I mentioned, that people have been trying to caution Trump away from this path. You had that aide, but you have some higher ups as well. In late August, Defense Secretary Mark Esper joined Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and John Bolton, the National Security Advisor at that time, for a previously undisclosed Oval Office meeting with the president where they tried but failed to convince him that releasing the aid was in the interests of the United States. That's a couple of months into this at that point. And so, again, those are a couple of people that we haven't heard much from. It would be great to have Pompeo and Bolton testify, but they've either opted not to or been blocked from doing so, which is totally the mark of an innocent person. And it's sort of interestingly too, in terms of what Mick Mulvaney knew and when he knew it and all this, I thought this was really interesting. Mr. Mulvaney is said by associates to have stepped out of the room whenever Mr. Trump would talk with Mr. Giuliani to preserve Mr. Trump's attorney-client privilege, leaving him with limited knowledge about their efforts regarding Ukraine. Or like the fact that he apparently just leaves the room whenever Rudy comes in might have a simpler explanation. Rudy's a weirdo. No. But yeah, apparently he was trying to limit his exposure to information that he would have to later deny having access to.
But there's no question, as you find out later, that he in fact did know it was connected to the Bidens and in fact pushed that along. But the very fact that he's trying to set up that excuse of, hey, when Giuliani came in the room, I always left, attorney-client privilege, means I realize I might get caught. And what we did was clearly illegal, okay? So now to the point that John made about the big meeting, Defense Secretary Esper, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, very, very loyal to Donald Trump, and John Bolton, National Security Advisor, all say to Donald Trump, you cannot hold this money. It's a really terrible idea. Do not hold up Ukraine's aid. It's not gonna work out well with Congress. They're gonna come down on you anyway. It's against our national security interests, et cetera. Trump's like, yeah, I know, but on the other hand, it would help the Russians, and I would get to investigate my political opponent. Man, this seems like an easy question. I don't give a goddamn about the law. What are you guys, stupid? Why would I care about the law? Now, did I make up the part that Donald Trump just spoke? Yes, okay. but the parts that the three advisors said is true, okay? So putting the kidding aside, those three top loyalists to Donald Trump come and tell him, do not do this. It's an immensely bad idea. And he goes, I don't care. That didn't affect him at all.
Yeah.
And look, again, putting the kidding aside, there are two different parts of this. One is he wants to investigate his political opponent and he doesn't care what laws he's breaking. The other is Russia loves this. It's because it's all military equipment going to Ukraine. They're in the middle of that fight at that point. In fact, right then is when Ukraine had seized a Russian tanker. Okay, so then all of a sudden, Donald Trump blocks military aid to Ukraine. Again, Putin celebrating in the streets. We are told by people who don't believe in overwhelming evidence that that continues to be a coincidence. Yeah. So yet another coincidence where Putin is happy about something Trump has done.
Yeah, so look, I found this article to be interesting. It puts a little bit more context to what some of these incredibly powerful, and not all, but some still well-connected members of the Trump administration were thinking and doing at the time. I don't expect that it's probably gonna change many people's minds.
But no, look, so let's talk about things that could be interesting if a trial ever occurs in the Senate. Because it wasn't just his own administration officials, lower level, mid-level, and higher level. It was also Republican senators. So both Rob Portman and Ron Johnson went and talked to Donald Trump near the end of this whole process, and they're like, "What are you doing? No, we appropriated the funds. You can't do this." He's like, "I don't like the corruption in Ukraine." So Rob Portman says, "Yeah, but quote, but we should not hold that against Ukraine. We need to release these funds." So here are Republicans coming in. That was on September 11th when Trump finally concedes and releases it. Two Republican senators saying, President Trump, you must release those funds. So, of course, the other enormously important data point here is a couple of days before that, Donald Trump had found out about the whistleblower complaint.
Yeah.
So they finally tell him. So he releases the funds on September 11th, and in the last 2 days before that, two things happen. He finds out there's a whistleblower complaint and he might get caught. And two Republican senators come in and say, you're in a world of trouble, man, if you don't release those funds. And we're not Democrats, we're Republicans. So it is indisputable that he released the funds because he got caught, not because he wanted to.
One other thing happened too. I wasn't gonna read this initially, but yeah, in that timeline, the day before he finally changes, after months of holding the aid, pushing for it to be held, he changes his mind. And take a look at this, this is amazing. And remember, his argument is that yes, for a time it was being held, but not because of White House trip or investigation, anything like that. It's just over the corruption. So on September 10th, the day before he changed his mind and finally stopped the hold, a political appointee at the budget office, Michael Duffy, wrote a lengthy email to the Pentagon's top budget official. He asserted that the Defense Department had the authority to do more to ensure that the aid could be released to Ukraine by the congressionally mandated deadline at the end of that month, suggesting that any responsibility for any failure should not rest with the White House. 43 minutes later, the Pentagon official, Elaine McCusker, hit send on a brief but stinging reply, "You can't be serious, I am speechless." Because think about this, Trump had been holding it for months. They find out about the whistleblower, the Republicans come, and he says, okay, let's do it. And what's been taking you guys so long? You could be expediting this, get this done, get this done. If it's not done in time, it's not about us. It has nothing to do with the White House, it's all on you guys. You guys are responsible. Now, is that consistent with, well, we've been holding it, but it's over corruption concerns. We're really concerned about the corruption there. Yeah. That they're suddenly trying to dump blame on anyone they can?
When the Pentagon originally asked, why are you holding up the funds? The Office of Management and Budget would not give them a reason. They're like, we're gonna get back to you on that. Because there is no legitimate reason. And at the end, right before they reverse their decision, they say, oh, it's the Pentagon's fault for holding up the funds. That's why she writes, you can't be serious. We're the ones who wanted you to release the funds from day one. Now you're gonna turn around and blame us? Trump 101. And again, if you're a Republican and you think Trump's gonna be on your side, no, he's not. He's gonna throw you under the bus the minute he can. Yep. Last thing, guys, the other thing that happened in the last 2 days was the chairman of 3 House committees announced that they were opening investigations. So Democrats are opening investigations. The Pentagon says you have to release the budget anyway, the money anyway. He finds out there's a whistleblower complaint and he got caught. And 2 Republican senators come and yell at him and say, you're gonna have to release the funds anyway. What are you doing? You're gonna get caught by everyone. So that's why he releases the funds. No ands, ifs, or buts. If you live on a different planet, okay, sure, whatever. In your planet, there is no logic, there are no facts. On this planet, Trump definitely held it illegally and only released it because of this pressure. Yeah. Last thing is, hey, I would call Ron Johnson and Rob Portman to the stand in the Senate trial. You guys are Republican senators. You talked to Donald Trump right before he released the aid. It looks like he released the aid because of you guys. So what did you tell him? And why did you tell him that? And were you concerned that he was doing something illegal? You obviously went to yell at him. You obviously went to disagree with him. You obviously went to tell Trump, you are doing something wrong. So why did you think he was doing something wrong? I would love to see that. Thanks for watching the Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.